Westwood One presents America at Night. Here's your host, McGraw Milhaven.
Welcome back. It's a Wednesday night, and boy, it has been a week already, considering what we all went through last night, which I guess as best can be described as a false alarm with the Nancy Guthrie case. And then, of course, you had the explosive hearings on Capitol Hill this morning with Attorney General Pam Bondi taking shrapnel and taking hits and playing defense all afternoon long. We're going to talk about that coming up in this hour. And then later on in this hour, we're going to talk about how even if you don't have a account with your Nest company, they can still keep the data from the camera and still keep the video. We'll talk to a privacy expert about all of that. But this first hour, let's get right to it. Famed defense attorney needs no introduction. He has represented some of the biggest and most high-profile cases in the last 25 years. Defense attorney Mark Geragos joins us for a couple minutes to talk about the Epstein files. Mark Geragos, thank you for joining us here on America Tonight.
Hey, my pleasure. Good to talk to you.
All right, let's talk about these Epstein files, and let's sort of throw away all the politics and all the fluff and all of the pomp and circumstance. As a defense attorney...
Yes.
I
would love to do that. I don't know if it's possible, but I'll try.
As a defense attorney, is there any there? Is there any smoke there? Explain these files to us. What are we seeing in these files?
Well, look, I was one of the ones, I will be frank, that was very dubious and cynical about there being any there. What has transpired, what has come out, is clear, to me at least, that there is some there in some cases. I mean, it shouldn't – I hate the idea that some people are getting tarnished by association, which I think is awful. But there are some reveals, so to speak, that are significant. I mean, I'll give you one example. There is the one that the Congressman Massey's been talking about, where there was a draft indictment, and it included a gentleman who inexplicably was not indicted. Now, I will tell you as a defense lawyer, you don't want draft indictments to damn you. And because you haven't been through a probable cause proceeding, a grand jury hasn't indicted you, something that's just been drafted. But given some of the kind of interest and the focus on the explanation or lack of explanation as to how Epstein acquired his wealth, those draft indictments become very interesting. And then when you combine that with some of the kind of revelations, and I'll tell you, this is one of the things that I think is most significant. I remember having arguments with friends of mine who had longtime CIA, either operatives or employees and things like that, and they were saying, "No, this guy Epstein, he's not related to the intelligence community, blah, blah, blah." And in fact, I heard my friend Alan Dershowitz saying if he had been affiliated, he would have known. Alan would have known. And I will tell you, once you take a look at some of the files here, there is, for people to make that assertion, I don't know that I would say he was in the employ, but clearly under any definition, he was an asset.
And so is that he might be the bad guy, right? They're all going to pour it to him as the bad guy. But
Correct.
As you mentioned, is everybody else guilt by association? Were they just, sort of didn't know that this guy was an asset? I mean, how much of it did Howard Lutnick know, and how much did he not know?
Well, look, I've looked at Howard Lutnick. I think that's guilt by association. Doesn't appear to be any there. I've looked at some of the others that are taking a beating. For instance, in L.A., the head of L.A. 28, Casey Wasserman, has been taking a beating because of some of the racy emails with Ghislaine Maxwell. Now, that might be untoward and it might be embarrassing for him, but it's, they're consenting adults, and you might have a morality issue with it, but there's no there. And They even hired an outside law firm to take a look at it, although there's those who are already questioning that. But those are two examples of people, I think, who have been tarnished by this. I have actually another friend, or somebody I count a friend, who's mentioned, who has been tarnished just because he was mentioned in it several times. So that's a real problem. But like I said, there are others who clearly, based on the emails, are engaging in something that requires more of an explanation. And so far, we haven't gotten it.
What about Prince Harry?
I think it's a real issue as to what was going on there. I think Les Wexner is the one who Tom Massey, the congressman, has been talking about that requires some explanation there. That's always been one of the conundrums about this, is the source of the wealth for Epstein. It was always talked about in terms, or framed in terms of, he was managing money for Les Wexner. Now, if you take a look at what at least some of the reveals have been, it appears that he may not have been managing money the way that it's been described in the past. So I think that that's one of the reasons they've been unredacting or removing the redactions on almost an hourly basis.
Mark Geragos with us for a couple of minutes to give us a sort of sense of how he sees these Epstein files. A layman question from a layman, but I hear this a lot out there, and that is, why is Maxwell in jail and none of the men who she, quote-unquote, trafficked these women to are in jail?
Well, I will tell you that I find it abhorrent, her sentence, everything that happened to her. I mean, she's the classic fall person, if you will. Remember, when she was convicted and indicted, frankly, by a previous iteration of the Southern District of New York. And the idea that somehow she's sitting and languishing in jail on a sentence that I think is fairly outrageous is really something. On the other hand, I will tell you, and I've said this before and people don't like to hear it, the sentence that was originally negotiated down in Florida for Epstein himself was not that out of line for a first offense. And if you believe what's being reported, and I've talked to the lawyers who were involved, Epstein was massively unhappy with the sentence. I mean, he got basically a year of house arrest, or what I call work furlough, where you go to jail only for a partial period of time. But the idea that somehow he got that kind of a deal on a first offense and she's languishing in prison at this point, I think is, I agree with laymen who find that hard to believe. And it really does not fit what should have happened.
I am not a conspiracy theorist, Mark Geragos. However, watching this story from the very beginning, it would make you a conspiracy theorist. Why are, and this is more of a PR question, I think, than a law question, why are they all acting guilty? Why are they saying we have the files, now we don't have the files, we don't want to release the files, we're going to give you all the files, we're not going to give you the files? They redact, they mistakenly not redact some of the women, but they mistakenly redact some of the men. They're all acting guilty.
Well, let me tell you a secret, that it's kind of one of the reasons that I have so much, I get kind of a perverse delight out of everything that has happened here. I've been doing this for over 40 some odd years. And I have, anybody who talked to me during those 40 years, some odd years, I would tell you at all times that the federal government, this is the way that prosecutors act every day, and they have acted for decades. This is what they do. There was a federal district court judge in the Central District here in Los Angeles, And Judge Eidman, Ideman, Judge Eidman he was a Superior Court judge. Then he went and got appointed to the federal bench. And he used to say, back in 35 years ago, being a U.S. attorney means never having to say you're sorry. And it really is true. I mean, you've got this awesome power of the federal government, and you can just wield it in any way that you want, and you're basically never second-guessed. And to some degree, that's what happened, for those, whatever side of the political spectrum you're on, that federal power was wielded against Trump when he was out of office. It was wielded against Hunter Biden when his dad was in office. It was wielded against Bill Clinton back in the 90s in Whitewater. And now you're seeing how that's being wielded, and you're seeing the dark underbelly of what prosecutorial kind of the machinations really look like. So I would just tell you I'm with you in some respects. It's not as much a conspiracy theory. It's what I've always said. The government just can't seem to get its act together.
Last question for you, Mark Geragos. They have released a whole bunch of Jeffrey Epstein files, but they haven't released what seems like a whole lot, right? Everybody wants all of the files. Even if they release all the files, I don't think they'll ever satisfy some people who will still be convinced there are other files. But do you think they are holding some type of smoking gun in the files that haven't been released?
Well, look, like I said, I was dubious, and I've been surprised. It would not surprise me at this point.
Mark Geragos, famed defense attorney Mark Geragos. Mark, I've been a fan a lot of years. Thank you very much. I apologize for the technical difficulties last time. Please don't hold it against us, and please come back next time we ask you.
I know you were imitating the federal government last time, so I forgive you.
Mark Geragos, thank you for staying up late tonight. Have a good night.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. There you go. There he is, the one and only Mark Geragos. Nice enough to spend a couple minutes with us tonight. I know he's a defense attorney, but I agree with him. I really I don't know if it's a legitimate question, right? Why is she sitting in jail, and all the men who were supposedly guilty aren't? Every man who's been mentioned in this is innocent. And, the questions about how he made his money, what kind of, that's sort of a whole line of questioning. But the whole sex side of it, there's a question that it's being used as a political club, if you will. He brings up an interesting point. I don't know if I agree with everything he said, but it's a really, really interesting point nonetheless. Stay right there. We're just getting started. When we come back, we're going to talk to a guest who is an expert in data and data privacy, because I think if you'd asked Savannah Guthrie, I'm glad that they were able to find the video of the man in the mask at the front door, but they didn't have a subscription. And when you delete something, does it ever really go away? And what about that? And what about our privacy? They didn't have an account, and yet they were able to recreate the video of an account they didn't have. And what does that mean for you and me? So we're going to talk about digital privacy when we come back, and just how much privacy don't we have, and how much privacy do we think we have that we don't have. So all of that. And then in hour number 2, we're going to talk to a man who has written a book. And if you remember, before COVID, there was an Ebola outbreak. And they were talking a lot about quarantining back then and there, the few people who had Ebola. Well, there was a company in the South that is well known in Georgia, as being the only company in the world that has the technology and has the equipment to go and rescue Ebola patients. And that's exactly what happened. It's a private airline in Cartersville, Georgia, and they came to rescue the Ebola patients. And there's a new book out, and it's all about the Ebola outbreak and how this small airline in Georgia saved the day. We'll get in and talk about that in hour number 2. And then, of course, hour number 3, open phones. Stay right there. We're just getting started. America at Night, back in a moment.
Live from coast to coast, this is America at Night with McGraw Milhaven.
Okay, when last we left you, the biathlete in Milan won the bronze, got to the podium and said, "Please forgive me, I cheated on my girlfriend," right? I told you that story last night. Well, guess what? She's responded after he oddly confessed in the post-race interview that he cheated on her a month ago and that he told her and that he's trying to get her back. She is now being quoted that they got a hold of her and they asked her, "Hey, what do you think?" And she said, quote, "It's hard to forgive even after such a public declaration of love in front of the whole world." She did not give her name. She told a Norwegian outlet on Wednesday, "I did not choose to be put in this position, and it hurts to have to be in it. We have had contact, and he is aware of my opinion on this." So she might be a little bit colder than the ice he was skiing on. It doesn't seem like there's going to be a love connection between the biathlon who professed his love and apologized in front of the world and this woman who broke up with him because he cheated on her. Stay tuned for the stunning conclusion. Stay right there. Data privacy and digital privacy, is it a myth? We'll come back and talk to somebody who knows a lot about it and what they know that we don't know. America at Night, back in a moment.
You're listening to America at Night with McGraw Milhaven. This is America at Night with McGraw Milhaven.
Okay, so you've got a Ring camera, you have a Nest camera, and you don't pay for the subscription. And so they tell you, hey, they're not going to save the video or the audio, and there's going to be no way to get it. And then you see Savannah Guthrie and her mom get kidnapped, and they took the Ring camera, and they didn't have a subscription. And then 5 days later, they show the world the video of a subscription they never paid for. And while it might be good in that case, what does it mean for the rest of us? Lia Holland joins us. She is campaign and communications director for an organization called Fight for the Future, a leading digital rights nonprofit. Lia, welcome to America at Night.
Hey, McGraw. So great to be with you.
So explain what we watched. I guess in this case it's good, and if you're Savannah Guthrie, you're lucky they got the video, something to go on. But it raises all sorts of questions about what type of privacy do we actually have? What are your thoughts as you sit and watch this story?
Oh my gosh, my first thought, of course, is for Nancy Guthrie and Savannah and their family. This is just so heartbreaking to see. And this footage of this man who clearly knows that there's a camera right in front of him is terrifying. And so for anybody looking at this, I would understand if they would think, I need to run out and I need to get a doorbell camera right now. But the problem is that there's a lot of questions with this camera about who actually is in control of it, who actually has access to the footage that comes from it, how it's being used, and whether this camera really is working as intended or as we might hope would work. Because, as I said, that man knew that camera was there and it didn't stop him.
Yeah, that's actually a point I hadn't even thought of, right? The guy knew the camera was there, but who cares? He still went in and something nefarious happened. So the cameras don't work as well as we think they would as a deterrent?
Well, one of the things that we often say in the human rights space is that cameras don't stop crimes. Sometimes, and as in this case, they can be used to investigate a crime and hopefully help to bring this to a conclusion that would make us all happy. But we really have to think about all of these cameras around us more and more on the doors of, it seems, almost every neighbor, at least in my neighborhood, that as tools that may also be used by other people, whether that is hackers, whether that is data brokers, whether that is government officials. A lot of people are concerned about ICE agents and the facial recognition systems that they're using on protesters. There's this idea that the more surveillance you have, the safer you are. And for some people, that's creating a false sense of security, when sometimes what we have to worry about more is it our camera that's going to get hacked this week, and what does that mean for our safety?
Yeah, so let's start with the fact that there wasn't a subscription. And I thought if you didn't have a subscription, they didn't capture it or save it, and it just sort of went away. That's not true. Somewhere, somebody's got all this video that no one's paying for when it comes to a subscription.
And the question of what's being done with that video is a really valid one. When we're talking about a big tech company like Google, which makes these Nest cameras, or Amazon, which makes Ring, when we choose a camera that has cloud storage where all of your video is uploaded into the cloud, where many different people potentially could access it, whether they're at the company or the company is being hacked or the company is selling on that data to third parties or sharing it with the government. There's a lot of insecurity there. There is also another type of camera, which would allow you to store that footage locally, which in this case with Nancy may have meant that the footage would have been accessible faster because the family would have had it available in her house to share with law enforcement. And B, would have meant that the family would have had full control over that footage, and it wouldn't be up on some server where they didn't even know that it existed and could be accessed.
These companies, Lia Holland, don't do things by accident. They're not stupid, right? So even though they don't give you access to your own video, they're clearly keeping it for a reason, right? Are they making money off of our Ring camera videos and our Ring camera and Nest camera audio?
I can't speak to what the privacy policies of Apple or Google or Amazon or any of these big tech companies say right now. What I can say is that they change them very regularly, and that there are many companies that are very incentivized to share as much data about us as possible with anyone who will pay for it. They are 100% there to make money, and to look for new ways to get more data to sell. So for me, if I were going to choose a camera, I would want to make sure that it was end-to-end encrypted so that nobody could sell what time I leave for work, or when my kids come home, or who walks past my house every day. I really care about that. And I think that, these companies aren't stupid, like you said, but I think that these companies often overestimate how stupid we are. There is this discussion is coming at a time where the Amazon Ring had their search party dog Super Bowl ad air, and so many people looked at that ad and they thought, oh my gosh, I'm the dog, or we're the dogs. This isn't about dogs. And I think that this is really a moment of us having the wool pulled from our eyes when it comes to these cameras and what they might be actually doing and who they might actually be benefiting most.
I wanted to ask you about that Super Bowl commercial, because talk about tone deaf. The commercial, for those who didn't see it, it's a very cute, adorable picture or a commercial of a lost dog. And if you lose your dog, you would call the local newspaper. You'd call the local TV station. You'd post pictures of lost dog on telephone poles. And Ring said, we will turn on everyone's Ring camera for free to track down your dog. And while, okay, it's great you might find Spot, but you're also putting a camera on every single person in America. It was quite tone deaf, I thought.
I very much agree with you. I think about I thought a lot about that ad and why they might be making this pitch right now at this moment, because there is an option now after, like, digital rights experts and advocates have fought for many years to get Ring to break up its police partnerships, to offer things like end-to-end encryption, and there have been some victories there. One of which is that users can actually turn on end-to-end encryption in their Ring settings so that they are the only ones that have access to their videos. But I would imagine that search party is only available if you have end-to-end encryption off, and Amazon is able to access all of the videos that you collect.
But on the other side, it might be used for good, right? I mean, this is the age-old Big Brother question, right? Oh, good, we're going to get the guy who robbed the bank. But hold on a second, you're going to get my 12-year-old daughter coming home from school, and someone's going to hack into my account and know when my 12-year-old daughter is alone at home in the house.
Exactly, and that's why what we need is technology that we control. I would want a system that keeps the video in my house, and I'm the only one that can see it. And I think that in this case with Nancy, it might have been more helpful than having to have Google engineers go back in and find this data, and however long that took. I mean, she's been missing for 11 days now. It's just unthinkable for me. But it's also, I struggle a lot thinking about, Amazon and Ring's new partnerships and the ways that they are motivated to expand how they're collaborating with law enforcement and other companies, particularly very insecure companies like Flock Safety, which is known for its license plate reader technology, but also very much known in digital rights circles for being extremely insecure. And I just really worry about everybody I know who has a Ring and their safety and their well-being as Amazon continues to expand the panopticon, as it were.
Lia Holland, our guest for a couple more minutes. She is campaign and communications director for an organization called Fight for the Future. It's a leading digital rights nonprofit. Lia, everybody has this story, but it happened to me just the other day. I was going to the gym, and I had my earbuds in, and one popped out and dropped and fell in a sewer grate. I lost it. So I got to the gym, and I needed to buy new earbuds because the one, right, I only have one. And as I'm getting into my car, pops up an ad telling me that I need to get, a deal on, earbuds. And I thought, oh, man, my phone is listening to me. I don't know if my phone's listening to me, But everybody's got a story like that you tell someone, oh, I got to get earbuds, and 5 minutes later, you have an earbuds commercial all over your phone.
So there's actually a lawsuit that Google is settling right now about just that thing. That phones, that Androids, I believe, have been listening to customers without their knowledge or consent. So that has been something that has happened previously, and it's. I don't think it's expensive enough for Google. Whatever dollar amount it was, I don't remember the exact amount that they're paying to settle this lawsuit. But yeah, the motivation to spy on us is very, very strong. And this company that I was talking about, the license plate database technology that for local law enforcement and HOAs and what have you, like they're preparing for their IPO this year, and they are just pushing forward with this very secure technology and putting their fingers in their ears saying, la, 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 la. Anybody who says that there's something wrong with what we're doing is just, is like, we're going to send them legal threat letters or get them fired from their job or just generally drag you through the mud until we get to this point where we have our big paycheck. And it's just not a way that any of us deserve to live. It strips us of our dignity. Like, we should have the Fourth Amendment rights to protect us from these sorts of things, and they've just been so eroded because our laws haven't caught up with where technology is.
The other thing, too, is, and we haven't even touched on social media and how that's, manipulating our data and, turning innocent pictures into, child pornography or all that type of stuff. But one of the things that is most egregious, and I think it sort of goes to this camera idea, is that once you delete something, it's never deleted. If it's a text, if it's an email, if it's a video, if it's anything, it's never deleted. And it's somebody somewhere can always find that.
That is generally true, unless the technology that you're talking about uses end-to-end encryption. Like, there's a lot of people are using the Signal messaging app to communicate now because it makes sure through very secure and audited technology that if I send you a message, the only people that see it is you and me. And so no matter who comes to the company or who hacks the company or who subpoenas the company, they just don't have the ability to see that message. And so they cannot turn it over. And our communications stay private the way that we think our communications are private if we're just, sending a Facebook message back and forth or a text message.
The one problem with Signal is you really can't text a journalist the war plans. That's where the Signal app really sort of breaks down in its old security apparatus. But that's a story for another day. Lia Holland, good stuff, interesting stuff. Leave us with the future. Is there hope? Is there despair? Where are you in all of this going forward?
I'm always hopeful because we are always learning, and I really feel hope in the idea of our lawmakers paying more attention to this than ever before and making our privacy part of their platform, because increasingly we are all demanding it. We can vote with our votes and we can vote with our dollars, and we can make change that way.
Yeah, it seems like it's a pretty bipartisan issue. I know nobody can agree on anything, but it seems like listening to you and listening to some of the politicians, there's a lot on the left and a lot on the right are saying the same thing about privacy.
Yeah, no, if only they would talk to each other about it, then maybe we could actually get some laws across the line.
Lia Holland, we will leave it there. You are campaign and communications director for an organization called Fight for the Future, and it is a nonprofit digital rights nonprofit. Lia, thank you very much for checking in on a busy night.
Anytime, man. Thanks so much.
You got it. America at Night, back in a moment.
America at Night with McGraw Milhaven. This is America at Night with McGraw Milhaven.
Interesting hour. Interesting couple of days. This anybody watch this Pam Bondi hearing today? What a clown show. The whole thing was. I mean, that's how the most powerful country in the world conducts hearings. I mean, I guess it was good theater. I guess you pull up some popcorn and root for your favorite team. But in terms of actually learning anything, I don't think we learned anything. And in terms of understanding, educating yourself on the process, no, none of that happened. I mean, it was a 15-round fight. I was watching that whole thing. It was just kind of embarrassing. Democrats embarrassed themselves. Republicans embarrassed themselves. Pam Bondi embarrassed. It didn't matter. It was a street fight. It was a brawl. I mean, it was like they were pulling each other's hair and scratching each other's eyes out and tripping over each other. And it was a tag team match. And oh my goodness, how embarrassing. Not going to talk about it because I don't think there's any redeeming quality to it. I didn't learn anything. I didn't watch all of it, but the stuff I watched, I didn't quite understand what the point was. It was just to try and score cheap political points all over the place. So there's no reason to talk about it because I didn't know what I was watching. But if you want to, we can do that in hour number 3. And that's where open phones and that's where text messages go. So we do all of that. Stay right there. Coming up, before the pandemic, before we ever heard the word COVID, there was a Ebola outbreak in 2014. And I think that story's never really been told. And our guest next hour has written a book called No One's Coming, The Rogue Heroes Our Government Turns to When There's Nowhere Else to Turn. It is the story of a small little airline in Georgia that has the ability to go into an Ebola outbreak and extract the innocent people and the sick and bring them home and get them healthy. It's an extraordinary story. It's getting a lot of attention, and we'll talk with Kevin Hazzard right after this. Our executive director is Alex Hinton. Our engineer tonight is Richard Good. I'm McGraw Milhaven. Stay right there. We're just getting started on a Wednesday night. This is America at Night on Westwood One.
Westwood One presents America at Night. Here's your host, McGraw Milhaven.
Hey, stay right there. Open phones next hour and text messages as well. And don't forget, if you do want to text our guest a question, the text line is open right in front of me. And you can text your question to 1-844-2-McGraw, 1-844-262-4729. Tonight's book, we're going to talk to Kevin Hazzard, who is a former paramedic turned author. And if you remember, before COVID, there was an Ebola outbreak that did reach the shores of the United States, and there was a heightened sense of alert and a heightened sense of worry. And there were some American healthcare workers who got sick with Ebola, and it seemed to be glossed over. It sort of went away. Everybody got healed, and nobody really knew the story. Well, that's what a good writer does. Kevin Hazzard went back and looked at a small little company in Georgia that turned the tide and did some remarkable things in the face of some pretty dangerous odds. The book is called No One's Coming, The Rogue Heroes Our Government Turns to When There's Nowhere Else to Turn. Kevin Hazzard, welcome to America at Night.
Hey, thanks for having me.
What got you interested in this story?
You know, I heard bits and pieces of it. I got to know one of the guys who runs the company. He had read one of my previous books. He was one of those people who had been a paramedic when he was younger, and it sort of stuck with him. And I wrote a book about sort of my experiences. Anyway, we got to know each other, and he had mentioned at one point that, yeah, we do these crazy kind of transports and all this really dangerous stuff. And he mentioned Ebola, and I started looking him up, and, the idea of getting on a plane with somebody suffering from Ebola and flying across the Atlantic Ocean was both terrifying and completely captivating to me. And I just, it was one of those things where I was like, I got to find out who did this and why.
So the company's called Phoenix Air, and it's in Georgia. But take us back to 2014. Set the scene for us. What happened?
So Ded Thompson is one of two brothers who run this company. Mark is the other one, who run this company, Phoenix Air. And they specialize in sort of things that are so dangerous that nobody else will transport them by air. And, that any time that there's something like that, either an explosive, a virus, at one point Muammar Gaddafi's suitcase nuke, anything that needs to be transported by air, these guys will say yes, basically when everybody else will say no. And Det Thompson was on vacation, and this is July 2014, the end of July, and he gets this phone call out of the blue from the State Department. And he answers the phone, and the person on the other end of the line said, there are Americans in West Africa, we're not sure how many, we're not exactly sure where, who are dying of Ebola. We have tried to get them out. There is no other company, government, or military that is able or willing to do this. You are literally their last hope. Will you get them home? And this is, again, imagine you're on vacation and this phone call comes in. Dent knows nothing about Ebola, but what the rest of us know about Ebola, which is that it's terrifying. And, he immediately, his mind goes to liquefying bodies and blood shooting out of the eyes and all the horrible things that we think of. And he tries to imagine going back home and telling his employees, hey, we're going to transport Ebola. And he doesn't necessarily want to do it. He's not sure his employees will want to do it. He's not really sure he can or even should do it. But then again, this is exactly what they do. And so he says, yes, we'll go ahead and we'll do it. Now, over the course of the next couple of days, what he finds out is that by July of 2014, 3 West African countries, Guinea, Sierra Leone, and Liberia, are in the midst of the deadliest and largest Ebola outbreak in human history. And thousands of people are and will die. 3 governments have already been essentially brought down by this. And they're going to have to make these 2 flights into the hot zone without any preparation, without really any time to think about it, to rescue these people and bring them out. So that's what they're faced with the end of July in 2014.
Kevin Hazzard, our guest. The book is No One's Coming. And a lot of people forget about this Ebola outbreak because I guess COVID comes along a few years later and, all right, the world changed with COVID. But 30,000 some odd people died of this. And one of the interesting things about this Ebola outbreak in Africa was that a lot of people died because they didn't believe the government, right? They actually had the vaccines, they had the medicine, and a lot of people died for the simple fact, Kevin Hazzard, is it not true that they just didn't trust the government and they didn't trust the healthcare workers?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things going on. There weren't yet vaccines. There was one that existed, but it had only been tested on animals. So nobody knew what it would do in the human body. The other problem is that, up until this point, Ebola had always stricken in incredibly remote areas. So by the time experts got in to see what was happening, it essentially burned through the available hosts. It had killed nearly everyone in the area and gone back underground. So there was not a lot of understanding. But people, from what little people did know, they didn't think that it would appear in West Africa because it never, it normally was in Central Africa. It never appeared on the West Coast. And it had never appeared in a populated area. It was sort of presumed that wherever this came from, it had to be incredibly remote. So when this fever, this virus begins to appear, people aren't sure what it is, but immediately, people are skeptical. We just lived through a pandemic, so we kind of have a sense. People immediately begin to think, well, hold on a second. You're coming in, you're quarantining our town, you're quarantining our homes, you're taking sick people out of their homes and bringing them somewhere else. We don't know what you're doing with them. We just know that they're dead when they return. So yeah, there's a lot of skepticism, which immediately, very quickly turns to anger. In a lot of cases, or at least in some cases, turns to violence. And so a lot of what happens is mistrust, fear, frustration that begins to build. And then on top of that, you're talking about countries where the resident to doctor ratio is already low. And Ebola is considered the healthcare provider's illness because, when you're at your most infectious is when you're at your sickest, and that's when the provider is going to be next to you. And so, healthcare providers are killed in great numbers by this virus. And so the healthcare system in all three countries essentially collapses. So it's, multiple things happening at the same time. But the end result is a scared and frustrated population that's just sort of watching its neighbors fall around it.
And Phoenix Air, a small airline company from Georgia, decides to fly in and extract American healthcare workers. Kevin Hazzard, our guest. The book is called No One's Coming. It is due out the first week of March. You can pre-order it right now. Kevin, hold that thought. We're just getting started. A lot more to get to. Text a question to Kevin, 1-844-2-McGraw. That's 1-844-262-4729. I'll try and work it into the conversation. America at Night, back in a moment.
America at Night with McGraw Milhaven, where the nation comes to talk. You're listening to America at Night with McGraw Milhaven.
Back in 2014, there was an Ebola outbreak in Africa. And the State Department calls a company in Georgia and says, get our doctors out of there. That's the beginning of the book, No One's Coming. Our guest is the author of that book, Kevin Hazzard. Kevin, before we get back to this story, talk about this company for a second, because it's kind of fascinating just as a business model in and of itself. It's designed to transport things nobody else will design. You mentioned Gaddafi's nuclear suitcase, or smallpox, or Ebola patients back to the country. It doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of things that would keep them busy in between these disasters.
That's the scary thing, is just how busy they are. These two brothers start the company in the early 1980s, a tiny little airline company, and they realize that, they're transporting auto parts to assembly lines. Assembly line breaks down, or they're missing a part. It's very expensive. It's got to get there immediately. So that's what they got into, but everybody was into that. And so they said, okay, what can we do that'll set us apart? How do we get out of this situation where we're just sort of competing against a million other companies? And one of the brothers, Mark, he loves adventure and he hates to be bored. And he said, you know what people don't like to fly? They don't like to fly dynamite, but it's got to get places. And that's what they started with, was dynamite. And once they built a name for themselves as transporting dynamite, they said, well, let's do high explosives. At one point, at the start of the Gulf War, they get a letter, or a phone call rather, from the Department of Defense saying, hey, look, we brought, this doesn't sound real, we brought the wrong warheads for our Patriot missiles, and we're missing the Scuds, and we can't begin this invasion. This is 1991. We can't begin this invasion without these warheads. Will you fly them? And so Phoenix Air enters into this really crazy multinational back channel in which they transport all of these Patriot missile warhead assemblies to the war so that the United States can begin this invasion of Saddam's Iraq, there's always some strange thing that needs to be brought somewhere, and there are very few people who are willing to say yes to this. And the thing with Muammar Gaddafi, the very short version is he knew the CIA wanted to kill him. He was trying to get that target off his back. He began negotiating with Clinton. He eventually wraps up the negotiations with George W. Bush. The final step is to de-arm himself. And so somebody has to go in there and pick up his recently unspooled nuclear weapons and bring them back to the United States. That's not something that most pilots want to do. The phone call comes into Phoenix. Mark hears what's on the offer, and he says, yeah, I'll take that flight, simply because it sounded exciting to him to fly into Libya and pick up Muammar Gaddafi's suitcase nuke. So, they're just sort of wired differently than the rest of us.
I'm assuming name your price, right? I mean, I don't think the government's going to go cheap on them and charge them, $15 an hour.
No, and that's the beauty of this thing. There's really not a lot of competition when somebody says, hey, do you want to transport a nuclear weapon halfway across the world?
Okay, so they decide to take the case, which is get a plane over to West Africa and pick up there was a couple of but two specifically, two healthcare workers who had come down, right, because the Americans go over there to sort of help, and there are two healthcare workers who catch Ebola, and they now have to bring them back. How do they go about doing this? How much time do they have? They don't have much time.
No, they have no time really. Ebola kills or doesn't kill in about a 10-day window. By the time Phoenix is located in this timeline, they're several days into that. So essentially, when they're approached by the State Department, they're deep into this 10-day window. So if they say yes, the turnaround is going to be almost immediate. Now, the reason that the phone call ends up going to Phoenix is a few years earlier, they had developed this biocontainment tent that could fit inside of a private jet. So very small. It's only a few feet wide. It's about 5 feet tall, but it's got these incredibly powerful filters in either end, and it runs on this negative pressure technology. And the idea is you take the deadliest virus you can imagine, you put it inside that tent, and it can't get out. This was tested by all these different government agencies, but it was designed by Phoenix engineers for the CDC. And the notion was, hey, if a CDC expert gets SARS, per se, and he's in Vietnam and he gets SARS, we need to be able to bring him home, because the CDC scientists were beginning to push back a little bit on being deployed all around the world for these viruses, because up to that point, the policy was called treat in place, which means that if you agree to travel halfway around the world to study or battle a virus and you get sick there, you're going to remain there until you're either healed or dead. And so people begin to say, I don't know if I want to go into that, if that's how this is going to go for me. So the CDC pretty desperately needed some way to get their experts home. Phoenix Air, through this sort of Apollo 11-like moment of ingenuity, comes up with it. And they say, okay, fine, here's this technology that we can use to get you back across the ocean and to home. And so they've got that technology, but they have very, very little time to use it. And the hitch is that it's never actually been used. It's been tested, but it's never been deployed. And the one thing that it was not tested against was Ebola, which is exactly what they're going to be using it for. Because
Ebola is highly contagious, right? I mean, it is highly contagious, and you can't have the pilot flying you back home get Ebola for trying to save the other two people.
No, nor can you have your doctors and nurses who are treating this patient on the way home get Ebola. The complicated part of this whole thing is that there's really no room for all the mess that's going to take place. I mean, everything imaginable is coming out of an Ebola patient, and all of that is incredibly, incredibly infectious. So every time somebody goes in there to treat this patient at all, they essentially, head to toe, everything they're wearing, all their protective gear is contagious and needs to be safely removed and then stored. Well, imagine you're doing that multiple times inside of a plane that's 110 degrees, and you're pouring sweat, you're absolutely exhausted, and you've got to do these really long and arduous process of getting into and then out of the equipment without contaminating yourself. Because if you do, now you're sick. Now your coworkers are going to be sick. As you said, the pilots are then going to be sick. And all those people, the pilots, the doctors and nurses, they're all going to walk off that plane at some point. So now what are they going to go home and infect their families? I mean, the pressure on these guys not to make a mistake, not to infect themselves, and essentially not to affect the American mainland with Ebola was immense.
Kevin, I got 30 seconds and I got a break. How big was the plane and how many employees went over to pick up the 2 healthcare workers?
2 nurses and a doctor, pilot and a co-pilot. This is a small private jet. Imagine, this is not a big plane. This is you're less than 6 feet tall. You're crouching as you're walking through this thing. It is like an 8-seat jet, very small.
So a very small private jet and 6 people, sounds like 5 or 6 people, head over there and have to go and extract 2 healthcare workers. Hold that thought. The book is called No One's Coming. The rogue heroes our government turns to when there's nowhere else to turn. We're talking about an extraordinary mission that the government asked them to do, is to go into West Africa during the Ebola outbreak in 2014 and extract healthcare workers and get them back to America. The book, No One's Coming. It comes out March 3rd. Pre-orders available where all fine books are sold. Kevin Hazzard, our guest and author. Back in a moment. America at Night.
Coming to you from the heart of the nation, this is America at Night with McGraw Milhaven. Join the nightly conversation, America at Night, with McGraw Milhaven.
The book is called No One's Coming. Kevin Hazzard is its author. It is the story about an Ebola rescue company, airline company in Georgia that is hired by the federal government to go to West Africa and extract healthcare workers during the Ebola outbreak in 2014. Kevin, why the name No One's Coming?
2 reasons. One is there's a sign that hangs in the offices of Phoenix Air's medical group, and it says, "No one's coming. It's up to us." And it's sort of their philosophy that they're the end of the line. If you've called them, there's no other help, and they're not gonna have anybody else to rely on. The other thing was, each of these. At every stage involved here, there's this question of, is somebody going to risk their lives for these strangers? The American healthcare workers who got Ebola, they answered that question. There was real concern about whether or not anybody would be willing to step in and help these 3 nations who were being completely consumed by this virus. And then once they got sick, there was another question of, will somebody step forward to help them get home? And all along the line, what happened was, anonymous healthcare workers who you've never heard of and otherwise never would have heard of stepped forward and said, "I'll be there for you." So, it was just sort of the idea that not only were these people the only ones that could go, but they were the only ones who would.
Yeah. Take me through I guess I kind of understand the Herculean effort to build this new contraption that is right out of a science fiction movie with the filters, and they get the plane over there, but they land in West Africa. It isn't like they had a functioning government or a functioning camp to go to. Once they land, who was their liaison? Did they have anybody to ask for once they landed? I mean, how did they get to where they needed to go, and were they walking around in spacesuits the whole time?
So that's the wild thing. They don't. They land and they're essentially walking around in shorts and T-shirts like they showed up on vacation. The country is more or less shut down. As you said, the government is very close to no longer functioning. Somebody gave them a ride, so there was a van waiting for them at the airport. But the airport is a ghost town. In fact, on their way out, one of the pilots had to run to the airport to find someone to approve his flight log, and the other pilot had to jump out and put fuel in the plane because there was no one there to fuel it for them. So it is a country that has ceased to operate. But it was a van driver, and he shows up, and you've got to sort of cross your fingers and put a little faith in the fact that the guy driving your van isn't also infected with Ebola. He took him to a hotel that was completely empty, and dropped him off. And they sat there because they had to. FAA regulations require a certain amount of crew rest. So think about that for a moment. They land to rescue these people. The clock is ticking. Their patients are dying. They're now in the one place on earth that nobody wants to be in, and they're forced by FAA regulations to remain there for a certain number of hours. So they've got to just sit in this hotel, wide awake. They're certainly not sleeping, just waiting for enough time to pass that they can get back on the plane. So, it was a very surreal, very terrifying time for them to be in a country that they knew behind every door was a suffering person.
Yeah, they were there to pick up, was it 2 nurses? Is that what, and the Doctors Are Without Borders? Who were they going to pick up?
So the organization was Samaritan's Purse, and it was a doctor and it was a medical assistant.
And at one point, wasn't there, if memory serves me right, wasn't there a doctor who had come back to America and had died or was in the process of dying from Ebola?
Well, there was that was later, but it was a nurse who came back and she went to Dallas, and the hospital that she went to was not prepared. The miracle of what happened with these patients that Phoenix brought back was that they were brought to Emory University Hospital, where this incredible highly infectious disease unit was ready for them. But the nurse that you're referring to, she went to a hospital in Dallas that was not prepared, and things did not go well for her.
Yeah, and wasn't there a controversy, I think, with the governor of New Jersey, Chris Christie, wanted to put somebody in quarantine, and the woman was angry and didn't want to be in quarantine? Or this was before the whole COVID-19 and mask and quarantine and staying away from people, and it was just sort of a push and a pull, and it got political, and everybody wanted her to stay in, and she wanted to leave. Wasn't that part of this as well?
Oh, yeah. It happened in New Jersey was a big one. You're right, with Chris Christie. It happened also in Maine. If you remember, they referred to her as the bicycling nurse, the one in Maine. But the idea was that both of these 2 nurses had already gone through the quarantine period, and they knew they were fine. But what was taking place in both of these places, New Jersey and in Maine, was a state of panic. There's that great scene in Jaws where the mayor says, if you yell barracuda, everybody just goes, huh? But if you yell shark, then you've got panic on your hands. And that's how this is. You can say, we have a measles outbreak right now in the U.S. Nobody's concerned. But if there was an Ebola outbreak right now in the U.S., we wouldn't be talking about anything else. And those nurses were frustrated because they had already been through a quarantine period and they knew they weren't sick. But the governors of their states were trying to impose this additional quarantine. And I think where they were really trying to make a stand was, well, if people are going to go and try to help, and then on their return, they're going to be treated like lepers, you're discouraging people from helping. And it's also not helpful anyway because we've already passed the quarantine period and we're not sick.
Yeah. Kevin, with this story and this Phoenix Air, this company out of Georgia, how much of this was allowed to be public? Was it top secret? Did they not want the word to get out? Were they allowed to talk about it? Nobody really knew of this company before this book comes out.
They were trying pretty desperately to keep this thing quiet. They understood that everybody was going to freak out when they heard. They were really concerned about what the people in their community were going to do. They were very concerned about how the city at large would react, and the government. I'll give you, sort of 2 perfect examples. As this thing goes along, the state of Maine threatens to charge a doctor with the State Department with a felony for aiding the repatriation of these 2 Americans. And when the ambulance was driving through the city of Atlanta with the first patient, the FBI had cars and snipers and helicopters following this ambulance because they were afraid that someone would either try to sabotage it or, and if you can believe this, or kidnap the patient to sort of weaponize the body. So, Phoenix Air, this is a small company. Its brain trust could fit inside of a small car. This is not some massive corporation. This is a small company run by a few people, and it's doctors, it's pilots, it's engineers. And they were really concerned about what was going to happen if the world found out what they were doing. And so they were trying their best to keep it secret. But as the first flight took off, one of the doctors leaned out and looked out the window, and he saw 3 news trucks below him pointing cameras directly out of space. And he knew at that point that the secret was out.
Kevin, is there not an Ebola virus outbreak going on right now in Africa?
I am quite certain that there is. There's almost always, that's the crazy thing about this virus. It has this tendency to pop up unexpectedly, almost without provocation, it would seem, and then disappear again. And so if you look, the first time it ever appears, or at least the first time that we recognize it, is 1976. But between then and today, there are repeated outbreaks. So you do have to wonder, pre-1976, how did we not notice? Because surely it had been around since the dawn of time. But since then, it has repeatedly popped up. And, frustratingly, when it emerges, there's not really a good indicator of when or where or even why this happens.
While we have you here, the book is No One's Coming. Kevin Hazzard, our guest. Ebola today, how treatable is it? And there is an active vaccine that is very effective, is it not?
Yeah, so that was one of the positives that came out of 2014 was, it happened in a big area. It happened to a large population. And so, the world's experts were able to study it, were able to sort of get their heads around it. A vaccine was in the works when 2014 happened. It wasn't even experimental yet. It was still being tested in animals, and yet it was used on a human. But there is a vaccine now. But really, the thing is, what you need to survive Ebola is good supportive care, the sort of thing you would get in an ICU. The problem is Ebola pops up in such remote areas that an ICU may not be close enough to you in order to save your life. So we do know how to treat it now. It's just a question of whether or not the patients can get there in time to begin getting that treatment.
Is there a vaccine?
There is, yeah. There's a couple different ones. The one that they used in 2014, has sort of been improved upon. It's not really used anymore. But there are drugs that you can take, less really vaccines than they are treatments. But there are, there's some really significant treatments and stuff that have come out based on this. And in fact, some of the Phoenix Air doctors gave their blood because they had been exposed and they had done all these different things. They gave their blood to help try to develop vaccines and drugs for it.
The book is called No One's Coming. Kevin, has Hollywood come knocking? Because this has got a Hollywood movie written all over it.
Yeah, they have. Although, that industry is in a very strange place right now. So who knows what will happen. But I mean, when I first pitched this book to my publisher, I said it's Argo meets Outbreak. And almost without hearing anything else, he said, all right, I'll take it. So, it's an incredibly cinematic story, this is unbelievable rescue pulled off by underdogs. It's imagine if, in Apollo 13, Tom Hanks was this sort of crazy cigar chomping cowboy, that movie would have a different feel. And that's kind of where this is.
Yeah, whether it's a movie or a Netflix series or something along those lines, it's got that written all over it. They're still in business, still doing what they do. They also had a couple of crazy COVID-19 rescues. Did this company not? Oh, man, yeah, they did. They were all over it. The technology that was used for Ebola was sort of expanded into a global scale for COVID. They took that idea of a tiny biocontainment unit and made it massive, and essentially the sort of they're shipping containers now, and multiple of them can fit in huge aircrafts, and they were flying all over the world, starting in the winter of 2018
when this virus, something strange was going on in China. Nobody knew exactly what. They began evacuating people from there. They evacuated multiple cruise ships, but they did evacuations all over the world for people with COVID-19.
What a bizarre business to get into. Do they have any other competition now, or are they the one and only?
No, they're the one and only. And in fact, you would think that a military would be involved in this, but militaries don't want to touch highly infectious disease. And so none of them really do it. Other countries have sort of dabbled in it. Their Phoenix Air's former medical director told me at one point that Germany was trying to do something, and the closer they got to figuring out the technology, the more they realized it was just too icky for them. And so they bailed out. I mean, WHO, all these different organizations, none of them have done it. It is not an easy thing to do. I mean, you've got to look someone in the eye and say, hey, do you want to sit for 18 hours on a small jet with a virus that may kill you? Most people are going to say no to that. Phoenix employs the only people who say yes.
Do they do less dangerous things? I know there are companies that transport organs, transport, sick people who need a liver transplant or something. I mean, do they do less dangerous trips?
They do. In fact, there was a beluga whale that got stranded in Alaska. They wound up being transported to a zoo or an aquarium in San Antonio, Texas. I mean, think about it. That's an enormous flight. Had to be transported in this open tank. Really tricky flight, because if you got too sharp with either your descent or your takeoff, you would spill this water and endanger this animal. And one of the Phoenix pilots flew this whale across the American continent, and he had to begin his descent in Denver in order to land in San Antonio at a neutral angle. So he spent the last 3 hours of his flight, quote unquote, in descent so that he could land. But he did it. He landed without spilling a drop.
So that's a real life Free Willy story then, I guess, huh?
Yeah. They'll take anything difficult they're in for.
What a story. Kevin Hazzard has been our guest. The book is called No One's Coming, The Rogue Heroes Our Government Turns to When There's Nowhere Else to Turn. The book comes out in March. Pre-sales going on right now where all fine books are sold. Kevin Hazzard, thank you for a fun night. Thank you for a fun story. Good luck with the book. Good luck with Hollywood. Don't sign away all your rights. Make sure you're part of the project, because when the author's involved, it is always a better story. So hold on to your rights, Kevin.
You know that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good night. The book is You got it. No One's Coming. Kevin Hazzard is the author. Hazzard. Hachette is the publisher. The Rogue Heroes Our Government Turns to When There's Nowhere Else to Turn. No One's Coming. Book comes out in March. Pre-sales going on right now. America at Night. Back in a moment.
Give McGraw a piece of your mind. Call now. 844-262-4729. This is America at Night with McGraw Milhaven.
All right, we are about done for hour number 2. Got a whole bunch of texts coming in from all over the country. I'll get to some of that next hour. And, of course, open phones, 1-844-262-4729. Let's see here. Janine Piero failed to get an indictment of Mark Kelly and the other 5 veterans. Why America is exceptional. That one's from Illinois. Here's another one. How can I listen if my radio station plays a stupid basketball game at this time? The Westwood One app looks like it's for sports. I believe. Yeah, that's a good question. I don't have the answer to that one. I apologize. I can't help it. I can't help when a station plays a stupid basketball game. How dare you preempt America at Night? Good evening, McGraw. This one's from Kansas. Good evening, McGraw. Law enforcement is definitely closing in on whomever is involved in this crime. I think it's just a matter of time. And this one looks like my sister chimed in from Florida. You're doing everything perfectly and bringing in the independent thinkers. Or this one from College Station, Texas. Love the variety of guests on your program. Kind of like Golden Corral on the radio. No greater compliment than to be associated with Golden Corral, because who doesn't love you a little Golden Corral? When I was in college, we used to go to Golden Corral, right? Sunday night, the dorm and the cafeteria would close, and so you had to go out on your own, and you had $2 to rub together, $3 to rub together, and you'd head over to Golden Corral, and all you can eat for $4.99. That was a good deal. Fond memories of Golden Corral. That is for sure. All right. Music says we're out of time. Richard is infringing on my free speech rights, so I guess I have to break for top of the hour. Stay right there. Open phones next hour. A couple of phone calls lining up. We'll get to those and others, plus the text line. Stay right there. Our engineer is Richard Good. Our executive director tonight is Alex Hinton. I'm McGraw Milhaven, and this is America at Night on Westwood One.
Westwood One presents America at Night. Here's your host, McGraw Milhaven.
All right, it's Wednesday night, everybody. Thanks for checking in. It's the dog days of winter. It's, pitchers and catchers reported down to spring training, so that's good news. So it's the darkest before the dawn. So pitchers and catchers report, that's good news. That means games should be starting up anytime, and before you know it, should be opening day. Got a story about opening day, but I got to wait till my sister falls asleep in Baltimore before I can actually tell the story on the radio, because she's already mad at me enough. Maybe if I have time later on deep in the show, I'll tell that little ditty of a tale. Here's the deal. It's open phones, and the text line is officially open. And this means that you can call up and ask and talk about anything your little heart desires. You can go rogue, take a topic that we haven't talked about, something that you're curious about, interested about, and it could be anything your little heart desires. 1-844-2-McGraw. That's called going rogue. And, of course, you can't have time to wait online, or you just want to chime in on a topic or something and text me a question or a comment. That text line is the same number. So you just go to your text app and text in your comments and text it to 1-844-262-4729. And you can get in on the text conversation. It's as simple as that. Let's go to the phones here. Tony, usually you're batting cleanup for us. Tonight you're batting leadoff. Tony in Montreal, welcome to America at Night.
How you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm doing great. Thanks for calling.
Oh boy, man, are the arguments flying tonight in St. Leo on what's going on in the United States from Minnesota? And so this is what I'm going to do, McGraw. I'm going to write my first novel called The Death of Shame. The death of shame in the United States, and then including any politician, whether it's in Canada or the United States. Here you have a guy, Nadler. I call him Mr. Nadler. What am I going to call him? Con Edison, the gas house. He's sitting in the middle of Congress asleep. No shame whatsoever. And there's.
Well, hold on. Hold on a second. Was he sleeping up in the dais today?
Yeah, he was sleeping somewhere on that Judicial Council, whatever it was. But,
did they have a picture of him actually sleeping?
I think so, yeah.
Oh.
Well, there was a couple of them. There's not just him. There's a whole bunch of them. But he's known for composting the Congress once in a while with biological materials also. So they hold him responsible for that. But I'm not. I'm being kind of funny about this because. When I say the death of shame, there's no more shame. You look at anybody in politics today. I'm not talking about red or green or purple, whatever color you guys are in the United States. Here in Canada, it's red and blue. None of them are telling the truth. You advocate for agendas that are false. That's the bottom line. There's no more truth in politics is you can advocate falsely all day long. As long as you have a dais and you have a platform, you can continue to bombard the normal working people of our country, Canada and the United States, with falsehoods. And you could create these agendas. And then the legacy medias and the agenda medias and the private medias and muckrack, they pick up all this stuff. And the regular guys that are lunch buckets that are working to keep their families afloat, they don't know what's true anymore. There's no more truth. Look, I grew up with Kennedy. Okay, Kennedy to my family in Canada was a god because he represented the truth, the way we wanted the world to be.
Tony. I mean, you're more right than you know. We are living in a 1984 novel, right? We are post-truth. It is whatever reality we want to watch. Everybody watches their own news. Everyone picks their own news. Politicians pick their own voters. No, Tony, you're absolutely right. And shame all over the place, right? Howard Lutnick, I don't think he's doing anything nefarious with anybody with these Epstein files, but he's guilty of being stupid, just beyond stupid for being friends with this guy, then going down and bringing his family and his nannies to have lunch at the island, then lying about it in front of the television audience, and then being busted for it. He's guilty of being stupid. And he should resign just for sheer stupidity of the whole thing. But no, there is no shame. You're absolutely right, Tony. I got to go, Tony. I got a full board of people. Thank you for the phone call. Let's try and get somebody called in from Schenectady, which is, I believe, if my geography is correct, is just north of Albany, New York. Love to hear somebody from Schenectady. When I was a kid, we sort of lived all over the place, and I lived for a short time in Guilford up in upstate New York. And believe it or not, I have some fond memories of it. We were little, but we spent a couple of years in Guilford in upstate New York. Long story short, but it was a lot of snow. A lot of snow and a lot of snowboarding. We had a nice big old toboggan too. But if somebody from Schenectady wants to call back, love to hear from you. Let's go to David in San Francisco. David, welcome to America at Night.
Oh yeah, thanks, McGraw. Yeah, I caught that Bondi hearing today, and what a mess that is. I'm glad that previous caller was talking about Lutnick. He's the Commerce Secretary. And if I remember right, some of the most sketchy stuff that he's done is to privately meet with Putin, and that we, the people, don't know what he negotiated with Putin. So he's got a lot of explaining to do. But regarding Bondi, and let's see, there's a congressman from Florida, Jared, I'll remember his name in a second. He just did a phenomenal description of the entire hiding of the Epstein file. He did I guess you have 5 minutes to speak, and he spent about four and a half of it describing piece by piece by piece how Donald Trump first claimed that there was no file, then did everything he could do to subvert knowledge about it. And then finally, when it came to the entire Congress, I think it was an almost unanimous vote. There was only one person that didn't vote for a release of the files, and the entire Senate did vote to release it all. And Donald Trump has still gone out of his way to insult America by claiming that it doesn't exist and come up with excuses why to re-victimize the girls who were basically raped. And when you start looking at the idea that Donald Trump is raping America.
Well, whoa, hold on a second. First of all, there's no evidence that Howard Lutnick ever met with Vladimir Putin. That's one. I did hear that guy's 4-minute speech on, that was actually, I agree with you, it was actually pretty good. And I'll agree with you that these Epstein files, even though there's a lot of, morally questionable ethics and inappropriate behavior and all those types of things, I don't know how much there is there. I mean, we'll have to wait and see. I'm not a lawyer. I mean, it's all pretty creepy to begin with. But but Clinton and Trump, there's nothing there. They were friends with everybody, and they were trying to raise money from rich people. So, not shocking, they're going to go and cross paths with a Jeffrey Epstein. So, David, I'm going to leave it there. Actually, you know what? Let me do this. Let me break. Mark, Catherine, Gil, everybody, hold on. We got a couple lines open for you right now. 1-844-2-McGraw, 1-844-262-4729. America at Night. Back in a moment.
The floor is yours. Call or text 844-262-4729. That's 844-2-McGraw. Text line is open. Send us a message at 844-2-McGraw. That's 844-262-4729.
Let's go back to the phones. The text messages are coming in. We'll get to them a little bit later on in the hour. 1-844-2-McGraw. We've got Catherine in Vancouver. Catherine, welcome to America at Night.
You know, in the 70s, we had door cams that were next door. Do you remember the show Bewitched? And Mrs. Kravis next door, and she was always, oh no, she's always freaking out. You know, she was Kravis in the cement, I tell you.
So what you're saying is Gladys Kravis was the nosy neighbor / cell phone camera?
Yeah, and we got it for free. You know, we see your nose sticking out of the curtain. You know, every neighborhood has a nosy Kravis.
Catherine, I find that somewhat offensive because I have been called Gladys Kravitz from time to time. And I wear that moniker proudly. I want you to know. I am.
Oh no!
You don't want to live next to me. I am Gladys Kravis. I want to know. I'm up in everybody's business. I know what Larry down the street's doing. I know what Bob up the street's doing. Oh my good! I am the worst. Oh, did you see the Jones? They got a new car. Interesting. He must be doing well at the office these days. Yeah. No, I am guilty as charged. I am the worst when it comes to being. You know why I'm the worst? Because no one knows I'm Gladys Kravitz, right? I'm the gossip king.
Yeah, but safety.
Absolutely. It's all about. I mean, I'll call the cops on anybody. I'll call the cops if somebody's garbage can is loitering further out in the street than it should. I'm calling the cops. No. And they'll ask me. Do you want to leave your name? No, I don't want to leave my name. I just want you to know that 1412. Maple Street, the garbage can is out longer than it should after the garbage man came and picked it up. No, I am Gladys Kravitz.
You're free, right? You're free. We didn't have to pay for door cams back then. Or now, if we have a Kravitz like you.
How about that story? That was a crazy story. Anything else, Catherine?
That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day. Gil in San Antonio, welcome to America at Night.
Good evening.
Good evening.
A couple of things. On Ebola, when the big Ebola outbreak happened in Africa, I was living in the Philippines. And the Filipino army is often called on by the United Nations to wear the blue helmets to be peacekeepers. And there were two contingents. There were two contingents in Africa at that time, and the president of the Philippines, by executive order, just withdrew them. But in the Philippines, they have an island set up where they can actually quarantine large amounts of people. They have structures on the island and infrastructure. So if they have to be quarantined for a certain period of time before they can come back into normal society, and it works out pretty well. And secondly, about Mrs. Guthrie, I fear that she's probably already dead. I think I told you I dealt with kidnappers, and I know how they think, and I'll tell you a story just to take a few seconds. When I was there in prison, some of the kidnappers asked me, if we kidnap American tourists here, how do we get the money from the States? Of course, at that time, there was no cryptocurrency or anything like that. And you could only actually transport $10,000 in cash across the border without making special declarations to do it legally. So there wasn't much of a market for snatching Americans then.
Yeah. Well, here's my take on this video, and I know last night the news was coming fast and furious while we were on the air, and at some point I think I was watching News Nation because I stayed up late after the show and watched some of the coverage, and I was watching News Nation, and they had a guy in Rio Rico, Arizona, and I was talking to the mother-in-law, the guy they'd picked up, and they were interviewing the mother about, does your son-in-law have a backpack like this? Does he walk like this? Early on, you were like, this is clear. This is not the criminal mastermind that was able to pull off this kidnapping. And so you sort of had a sense that they were going down a rabbit hole. You can't blame them, but you just sort of realized pretty soon that this probably wasn't the guy who was involved. But think about this for a second. The video shows the utter ineptitude of the guy to understand the camera. So he's so inept that he puts his hand up, and then that's not working, so he walks out of the vestibule and he goes to the front yard and he takes some brush and he brings the brush back and he puts the flashlight in his mouth like he's in some type of Leonardo DiCaprio sort of safe-cracking movie. And then he takes the brush and he tries to hide the camera with it. I mean, just utter incompetence, right? Sheer stupidity. And so how does somebody that idiotic, that moronic, that stupid be smart enough to remain a mystery for 10 or 12 days? It just doesn't compute, right? Somebody that stupid's not that smart, and somebody that smart is not that stupid. So this is a head scratcher. In some ways, I think you're right. She might not be alive, but in other ways, these stories, the Elizabeth Smart stories, where she's found years later. I lived through a couple of stories here in Missouri where a child was abducted, and 2 or 3 years later he's found. So we just don't know. And if you're the family, you're going to hold out hope until there's no more hope. So, Gil, while the cynic in me says maybe she is, the little angel on the other side says hopefully she's still alive. So you just sort of wait and hope and say a prayer and see what happens. Gil, I thank you for your phone call, and I thank you for you listening to the show. 1-844-2-McGraw, 1-844-262-4729. Mark, I want to talk a little baseball with you, so hold on. We'll talk baseball coming up here in just a second. Text line's open, 1-844-2-McGraw. Now that Gil and Catherine and Tony are gone, we got a couple lines open for you. So if you're listening and you haven't called in, hey, how about a first-time caller segment? Call in. Be a first-time caller. Love to chat with you. Don't be shy. 1-844-2-McGraw or 1-844-262-4729. Back in a moment. America at Night.
This is America at Night with McGraw Milhaven. Join the conversation. Call 844-2-McGraw. America at Night with McGraw Milhaven.
All right, text line, 1-844-2-McGraw, 1-844-262-4729. Let's get a couple more texts here, and then we'll go to the phones here. Let me see here. Does cryptocurrency have any real value? Well, that's a loaded question. I don't know. Yes, it does. It does have real value, but the real value is what somebody places on it. It is traded on the markets, right? I mean, there is a market, so it's whatever the value of the market is today, right? Whatever somebody's willing to buy it on the market. So it is real value. Now, you can't take a Bitcoin that doesn't exist and go to a restaurant and buy a beer with it, unless you transfer it to that guy's account digitally. There's no real actual coin or money, so it's kind of a loaded question there. Mark in Roseburg, Oregon. Hello.
Hey, McGraw, with baseball season coming up, I'd like to get your opinion on two players.
Yes.
The first one is Pete Rose. Should he be in the Hall of Fame?
Mm-hmm.
And the second one, I know you played fairly high-level baseball. What is your opinion of Shohei Ohtani? Now, I'm just going to hang up and listen to you.
Okay, you betcha. Let's start with, I'll take the last one first. I always like saying that. Let's talk Shohei Ohtani. So, he's sure is fun to watch. Not going to lie. He sure is fun to watch. He's really... early on, you were like, oh, it's like watching Babe Ruth. But Babe Ruth never did any of this stuff. Babe Ruth was a pitcher, and then he was a hitter. Babe Ruth didn't pitch and then hit in the same game. So what we're watching with Shohei Ohtani is unlike anything we've ever seen before. It's unbelievable. I mean, it is unbelievable. And I know that word is overused, and we use that word a lot, and the word unprecedented is used a lot. It's unprecedented how often we use the word unprecedented. But to watch Shohei Ohtani, that World Series last year was so riveting. It was so fascinating. I wasn't rooting for the Dodgers at all, but I kind of wanted to watch Shohei Ohtani. And I think he started, right? He started Game 7 and got sort of knocked out of the box relatively early. I got to tell you, or Game 6, whatever it was. He's fun to watch. He's fun to watch. I don't hate the Dodgers. I don't like the Dodgers. Do I hate the Dodgers? Kind of. I don't like Mike Scioscia. He hit that home run off of Gooden back in the 88 playoffs that I've still got a bone to pick with him. But I don't mind the Dodgers. I'm not rooting for him. I was rooting for the Blue Jays, but Shohei Ohtani is fun to watch, and he's good for baseball. As for Pete Rose, I was at an Albert Pujols charity event a few years back, and there was a baseball signed by Pete Rose, and they were selling it. He had signed a bunch of them, and he signed it. I'm Pete Rose, and I bet on baseball. Pete Rose. So he signed the baseball. I bet on baseball. And then autographed it, Pete Rose. And they were auctioning them off, I think, for $100. Not auctioning off, but you could buy them for $100. And I so wanted to buy one, but I didn't. And I'm kicking myself that I didn't buy one for $100. Here's my thought on Pete Rose and the Hall of Fame. And it's the same thought process when it comes to the steroids and the Hall of Famers. And it's simply this. It is the most exclusive club, one of the most exclusive clubs, right? Living Hall of Famers. It's their club. They were the ones who were inducted into this thing. I truly, honestly believe it should be up to them. If they think that Roger Clemens should be in their group, I think it should be up to the Living Hall of Famers. If they think Mark McGuire should be in the Hall of Fame, it should be up to the living players. If they think Rafael Palmeiro should be in the Hall of Fame, Cubs traded him because they didn't think he had enough power. He ends up hitting over 500 home runs, right? Steroid induced. It's up to the group. I get that the baseball writers get to vote. Now, you know, the fans have an opinion, and we love to go to Cooperstown, and it's a great place, and I know baseball is special and all that, but there's no other way to answer it. No disrespect to the writers, who I have great respect for. No disrespect to the fans, who I have great respect for. No disrespect to the owners, who I have great respect for, many of them. I think it's up to the Living Hall of Famers. And if the Living Hall of Famers say he suffered enough, he should be in the Hall of Fame. My only bone of contention with Pete Rose is this. And with no disrespect to Rob Manfred, who is the commissioner of baseball. And this is my overarching philosophy. And somebody wants to know, hey, are you liberal? Are you conservative? Here's what I am. I believe in redemption. And I believe that if somebody is sorry for the mistakes they made, they should be allowed up. They should be allowed back into society, right? There but for the grace of God go any of us. And the fact that Pete Rose, after his death, is allowed in the Hall of Fame, I think was too harsh. I really do. I think that was, the man paid his price. The man made a mistake. We are all human. We should all ask for a certain amount of grace. And once Pete Rose, and I know Pete Rose, didn't help himself and lied about it for all those years and was a bit of a nudge and, stuck it to his thumb in the nose of baseball all those years with all the other, doing a book signing or a card signing at a casino or whatever else. I get it. But the fact that they're going to lift the ban after he died, I don't know. That just seems like twisting the knife a little bit. And whether it's Rosie O'Donnell who said something stupid or somebody liberal who said something stupid or somebody conservative who did something stupid, whether I like them or not, whether I'm friends with them or not, if you're sorry and you apologize and you learn from your mistake, ruining your career, never to be heard from again, I'm sorry. I just find that to be excessive. That's all. That's my thought on all. There's a long answer to your question, Mark. I apologize, but it's we're so easy to throw away anybody and everything. These are human beings who make mistakes. They're human beings who have to. It's. I think they're teachable moments. Whether it's somebody saying something racist or anti-Semitic, or somebody saying something sexist or doing something inappropriate. I mean, if somebody is a serial rapist, I'm not saying they should, go back to their job and not be punished for their sins. I'm saying this cancel culture is ridiculous. And everyone loves to blame the other. Oh, you're for cancel. Oh, you're for cancel. Oh, you want to. Everybody's guilty. And if your guy's on your team, you'll defend what he does. But if your guy's not on your team, oh my goodness, throw the book at him. It's become. I don't think we should be that flippant with life, and we should all be able to accept someone's apology and move on. And I don't care who you vote for. That's my philosophy. David in Canada, thanks for holding on. Welcome to America at Night.
McGraw, I I wanted to discuss, you talk about rogue topics, a book in the Bible that's interesting. The book of Esther, it doesn't appear anywhere in the Dead Sea Scrolls, and the word God doesn't appear anywhere in the book, which always seemed interesting to me. And I'm just wondering, is it being applied to the presidency right now? It's how to take over the administration of an unpopular leader and use it to destroy your enemies. That's what the theme of the book is. And the president taking down the east wing of the White House, he said he's accountable to no one but himself when he thinks. The reason for that is he hasn't married an American wife. Of his 3 wives, only the middle wife was American. That marriage lasted for only 6 years. Of his 42 years of being married, therefore, 36 of them have been to models, not American lawyers, who have foreign births, and in your country it's required that you be born in America. I want to suggest that you have to have an American wife, because an American wife would have stopped him from tearing down the east wing of the most historic building in the greatest country in the history of the world.
David, there's a lot to unpack there. I've don't know anything about the Book of Esther, so if I comment on it, I'll sound like a bigger idiot than I normally do, because I don't know anything about the Book of Esther. So that's one. 2, Donald Trump's greatest strength is he doesn't live by guardrails. He just
I agree with you. He's a great leader.
He just does, right? I mean, who never in a million years would anybody else ever say, let's tear down the East Wing before we have plans to rebuild it? Or what about the historic nature, and what about the history of this, and you got to go through this blue ribbon this, and there's going to be all of these historical societies. It's a historical building, and so you have to make sure you do it correctly, and you save this and you save that, and painstakingly rebuild this, and the bricks from the 1820s and the pottery
well,
we found.
I'm getting your point, but naming the Kennedy Center after himself, when a man who gave up his life, one of your great presidents, Mr. Kennedy, President Kennedy, and to name it eponymously after himself. I mean, I admire Mr. Trump for his tariff policies. I admire him for his economic policies. But his sense of what it means to be an American patriot. But it's so. But
the point I'm making is that it's so outside of the realm of imagination, right? No president ever would have thought to, you know what? I can put my name on the Kennedy Center, and he just does it, and that's part of his genius and part of his insanity.
Of his genius, that's begging the question to the argument.
No. Look. It's part of his genius, and it's part
Let's call
of
it narcissism. It has a word.
Oh, okay. Yes. It's part of his genius and part of his downfall, all at the same time, is that he doesn't live with any guardrails. Now, the day he's out of office,
Mar-a-Lago instead of the White House.
David, the man was elected president of the United States twice. So he is president of the United States. The day he's no longer in office, whether that's 2028 or 2032 or 2050 or whenever he's no longer in office.
Or 2026, because in the way he's going.
Whatever. They're going to take his name off of the building. They're going to call it back. They're going to call it the Gulf of Mexico again. They're going to go back to calling it the Defense Department, right? They're going to because he's not passing any laws. He's just doing it, and so it is hubris. As for the White House, look, irony is lost on a lot of people, but the symbol of him going down the escalator, the symbol of him tearing down the east wing of the White House. Does anybody see the symbolism in this? So he might have the power to tear it down. It looks like he might have trouble building it back up again. It might be years before the plans are ever approved to redo the East Wing. So
he wants to redo the West Wing to make it match the East Wing. This
I understand it, but the courts are now getting involved in the rebuilding of this thing, and so they're slowing him down. He had the power to tear it down. He didn't have the power necessarily to build it back up. Look, it's part of it's Donald Trump is a Rorschach test, and there's no other way to describe it. And somebody looks at Donald Trump and says, "What a genius!" You look at Donald Trump and you say, "Oh my goodness, this man is the worst." It's just how you choose to look at him. I don't know what else to tell you.
I enjoy your show like everyone listening. You're a wonderful person to listen to on the air, so keep up the great work and have a good night. Thank you.
David, I thank you for your phone call. Call back anytime. And I gave you the last word. And I didn't mean to jump on you, but there are people, I've had these conversations, and I just choose not to engage with them. If one loves Donald Trump, God love you. One hates Donald Trump, God love you. I don't play that game. I just sort of, I'm a social commentator. I just call him as I see him. And part of Donald Trump's genius is that, he does what he wants. It's part of his genius, and it's part of his downfall. That's right. People love him because he does whatever he wants. People hate him because he does whatever he wants. Right? And then people yell at other people, "How dare you not love him? How dare you not hate him?" It's crazy. It is a bizarre situation America finds itself in. And he is a bizarre candidate. He's a bizarre president. It's a bizarre time in this country. I don't know what else to tell you. David, I thank you for the phone call. Call back anytime. Good stuff. It's America at Night. Back in a moment.
Give McGraw a piece of your mind. Call now. 844-262-4729.
All right, we are about done for the night, but do I have enough time to tell this story? Story in the Wall Street Journal this morning that I thought was quite interesting. I didn't have time to get to it until just now. But OpenAI is a company, right? OpenAI. And they fired one of their top executives on the grounds of sexual discrimination. Not that surprising. But it is surprising why she was fired for sexual discrimination. This woman voiced her opposition to the controversial rollout of artificial intelligence erotica product in its Chat GPT. So this executive said, "Hey, we have this Chat GPT, and you can use it for pornography and erotica, and I'm not so sure that's the best way we should use that." And she was fired for sexual discrimination. She was terminated for her sexual discrimination against a male colleague for voicing her opposition to the way the company is creating pornography in their Chat GPT. How's that for a story? Wow. Why were you fired for sexual discrimination? What happened? I said they shouldn't use porn. Oh, okay. Wow. There's a story for you. Wall Street Journal today. All right, we're done. We'll see you tomorrow night. Listen to this. Our executive director is Alex Hinton. Our engineer tonight is Richard Good. Thanks for listening, and thanks for the guests tonight. I'm McGraw Milhaven, and this is America at Night on Westwood One.